All right, I think we should be good to go. Apologies for the slight delay there. I was trying to arrange the fans in the room in a way where I could get a little bit of airflow without melting and without exploding the camera as well, or sorry, the headset rather, I should say. Um, has been very warm, warmer even than last week for the last few days, barring a middle of the night rainstorm the other day. And as a result, all this week I've had not only that fan in the background that you can see behind me over my shoulder there, that one running, but also one right here and one right there that are both off of camera. All three of them creating enough of a breeze to keep things going. Oh, I better take this off too. And with that many tornado level fans, you cannot hear a thing. So I tried to adjust things such that I can still get a bit of a cooling breeze, but at the same time, we don't end up cooking me. As such, and given the fact that there's not a super deep plan for this evening's stream, potentially this one might not be as long. We might go a little bit short on this one, depending on what it is that we're doing, because after spending all day in here, I'm not entirely sure how much more I can stand. But in any case, hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. Welcome to the stream. And we are pretty much ready to kick her off. I don't really have any set plans for this particular evening, except that one of the things I wanted to work on was some changes to the pipe text plugin that we worked on in the previous stream, because there is a little bit of a, I'll say, issue with it per se, that I would like to get resolved for my own purposes, and then we'll see where things take us, because I don't really have a lot of real deep plans in that regard. So yeah, we'll see what is going down in Beantown, such it is. So let's go ahead and press the magic button. Hello, fellas of Blind Text Fanatics. OdatNurd here. Welcome back to this particular live stream for the day of August the 18th, the day I was supposed to go to the dentist, but they called at the last moment and said, hey, could you come another day? So what could potentially have been a canceled stream has ended up not being the case. So huzzah for that. Not quite as huzzah for solving ongoing dental issues, but there we have it. So we're going to be working this evening on, at the very least, the pipe text plugin that we were working on in the last stream. This is working pretty good. There was a few changes that we'd like to make to this. One for sure. The others, it's hard to say what the good user experience is for these things. Actually, oh yeah, there is some more stuff that we can do, so that's good. But there's just some stuff. Well, we'll get to that when we get there. So if you missed last stream or haven't caught up, we are working here on this a package I'm calling Pipe Text, because my good friend Keith Hall wrote a plugin for our Stealthy and Hasty scraps repository named Pipe Text, which is the command that's actually in here. Thusly, we'll even no, hang on. There we go. Worked on a plugin the other day and forgot the key binding for it. I used a different one here than I did on my Windows machine. This pipe text command is what he implemented as a text command. And oh, someone is asking some stuff. Well, we'll worry about that in a minute. Right before the stream started, I was helping somebody in the forum. Maybe we could even help them here, as a matter of fact. Let's see what we can do about that. What was I saying? That yes, Keith created this plugin as something that you can do, because the underlying code for executing code, which is way up in here, we did some stuff. Execute with standard in. I think that was at the top at the very beginning there. Scroll that up a little bit more. The subprocess.run method is I gather, a new thing in Python 3.5, which makes it a lot easier to execute things, capture their output, send in some input. So he created a plugin that would allow you to select some text and execute a command, sending that text out to the command, and then replacing what comes back with or replacing the selected text with what comes back. And I took that and made some modifications that he himself wanted to make, one of which was making this multi-threaded. Hello, Ashwin. And although this pipetext.py plugin, as we see it right here, is actually part of the Scraps repository, which I probably should link at some point, um, uh, I wanted to put it in its own repository so that I could work with it with impunity and wild abandon, if you will. And then when it's all said and done, we could merge it back into the Scraps repository, or maybe it'll morph out into its own little mini package that we can release. I don't know, but we don't like to put anything into the Scraps repository without, having other people check into the code. And I just didn't want to mess up the history in that particular repository with a bunch of changes that may or may not actually exist. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to do tonight for sure, related to changes that we made last week. And for the purposes of that, if I did this, one of the things that we can do is execute, say, a command with an exclamation point in front of it, which in this case is going to do a whole lot of nothing. Actually, do I have an example of? No, I don't. That's one of the other things we'd like to add here. Sleep 5 and cat. And if I select all this text and execute this command, we see the item up in there saying what it's doing. It's running in a thread. This is locked, and then the insertion happens in there. Whoops. And the idea of this is you would run it with some text like so, and that command would execute. Whatever result comes back is inserted into the replacement. I added the sleep in there just so we can see it happening. But the reason I wanted to add that is for the ability to do something like this and have it insert text into the buffer right at the current position. And there's special logic that we had to include in here because normally if you select text and you execute, then what comes back should replace it. And I think that shouldn't have happened there. So there may be some more action going on there that we need to look into. But in the case where you might want to actually do that thing that I did previously where I said this, you notice I'm catting and I'm not getting any output back. And that's because the way that works, normally what should happen if I did this, if I did ls without the pipe, this is probably the best way to explain this, and no text is selected, what the code does is say nothing is selected, so let's pretend everything is selected, and the result of that is it erases the contents of the current file with that because it inherently pretends that the whole file was selected before it executes the command. So that it has some text to send out. But what I would like to do is that thing where I was just doing this, and it inserts into the buffer. And the way I implemented that was if the command starts with an exclamation point, then don't grab the whole thing, just use the selections as they currently exist, which might be the reason why that thing is there. Yeah, so YouTube, normally that works quite well. I did notice earlier today that WhatsApp, if you use it from a computer, will totally let you use emojis like that. I'd never noticed that before. But the intention was still the same. So an issue with what I implemented here is that you still want to maybe say something like this and have it still grab the whole file by default, but still only insert it and not replace it. And right now, that's not possible. Cat in this case does nothing when I do that because it's not actually getting any input. The other issue with this, and I should probably maybe fix that first, is that if everything was selected and you did this, oh, is that not what I did previously? It seems like it should be replacing the selection. So there might be a couple of things that are actually wrong with that particular item. Just very quickly, before we get rolling here, somebody had a, oh, well, okay. I was going to say, someone had a question in the forum where they were doing something. It said the console reports an error when triggered run missing two required positional arguments. The reason for that would be that, if we learned in plugin 101, you executed a command and it didn't provide the arguments. But he specifically said that it actually works if you open the plugin and trigger a resave, which means that that plugin is likely doing something in the top level that it shouldn't be. Hey, look, my lower third is working. Huzzah! It's the first time I've ever actually seen it pop up in that display there. But when he posted the code in here to look at, it is not properly indented. So it's really hard to say what this might actually be doing. Also, a command dimension, is that actually one of these things? Yes, that one. And the other one is crunk. So I was going to say maybe we could help out with that, but there's a lot of Chinese characters in here and it's not indented properly. So I'm not really interested in trying to spend time doing that. So let's get back to what it was that we were doing. Here's the pipe text command. And here's the thing we're working with. If not all of the selections are empty and we were asked to do a replace, then just use the entire buffer. But, and this is where I can't quite remember what the logic was that I was going for here. Use the user selections is that part. If not all selections are non-empty. See, this is one of those bits of code that isn't immediately obvious. Self-view cell returns the selection, which is a list. All iterates over the list, right? Selections return true if they're empty and false if they're not. Is that how this works? Let's see. Whoops, don't use self in that one, fool. Let me move those out of the way a little bit. So that's a region. If I did this, it's false, but true. All right. That's one of those things that's new in the new API, I think, the new 3.8 API, or just added new in Sublime Text 4000 builds. So new to the API wouldn't work in Sublime Text 3. That's a whole lot of indented, unindented, code block, non-code blocked code. Yeah, I know I think some of it automatically gets code blocked because it's indented 4 characters and that's the manual way to do that, but it's not entirely clear why the other part wasn't that way unless it's also not indented properly, in which case it doesn't seem like it would work, except that he mentioned that it would work. But at the same time, it doesn't really look like he's executing a command that has those particular arguments either. So that one is a real puzzler. Ow. I apologize in advance for that, but the extreme heat in here is making my head a little sweaty and itchy under the headset. Let's fix that a little bit. So if not all of the selections are empty and we were asked to do a replace, then use the buffer. Now, if I remember correctly, do replace is whether or not the command starts with an exclamation point, and it would be false if it starts with an exclamation point and true if it does. So there may actually be a little bit of an extra bug in here. The idea being the exclamation point should what? Allow it to insert. I actually wrote down what I did. I haven't had a chance to look at this since then. If the first character is that, then the command operates as above, but the result is inserted into the buffer instead of replacing the input text. Okay, so that was actually doing what I thought it should do in that particular case. If there's text selected, the thing that's broken here is if I did this, nothing happens, or something does happen in that case because there's actually something selected. Sorry, this should be the same as this. That is, when there's an exclamation mark and not all of the selections are not empty, it should still gather the whole buffer when it does it, but it should still do the insert at the cursor location, which currently it doesn't do. Or if you will, this does nothing because there's nothing selected, so it's not gathering the whole buffer, so the cat command has nothing to return. So there we go. Something else that might be good here is don't replace text if the result that came back was an empty string. Because maybe you wanted to send output through a command that in a side effect kind of way. That's something that this could do as well. So if we came back to the magic of this thing, if not all of the selections are non-empty, and again, if we look there at the thing, it returns true if the selection is not empty and false if it doesn't. So this, we could even test it right here on the console. This is something we mentioned earlier in the Discord. If I paste this in here, this is definitely code that seems like it should be better documented here. If there's an error in the shell command, does the selection get replaced with the error string? I believe it does. Let's see. It just says capture output. I think the inherentness of that is standard error and standard output both get redirected to the same thing. But we could test that out. That would be interesting to see. If there are 3 selections and all of them are non-empty, then it's true. If there are 2 selections, please don't do that. I don't know if you can see him. I got my my faithful canine companion is back there, laying over there because it's too hot to be under the desk, letting me know that there's somebody in the hallway. He's a real sweetheart. Self-view, not all. View cell. So again, let's see that. If there are 3 selections, then that's true because they're all non-empty. But here they are empty, or they are non-empty, so that's false. So that is confusing in the extreme. One of the things that Keith mentioned is that the stuff that I threw into the README could be better explained, and I would agree, and the code could be better explained as well. It gathers the entire buffer if not all selections are non-empty. This is one of those, the heat is kind of getting to me kind of things, because this made perfect sense last time. So, what obvious thing am I missing here? The idea is supposed to be that if you have 2 selections, then it should use them. So this should bail out with a false, right? Because it's actually using the user's selections. And if there's 1 full selection and 1 non-empty selection, then this should return true, in which case it would just use the whole buffer. But this part messes that up. It's probably easiest to fix both of those issues if we fix the underlying problem, which is in the case where there's nothing selected, i.e. in the case where that returns true and do replace, which means the opposite of that thing, it should still do this in that case when it's do replace, but it should keep the selections so that it can insert the text in the right place. Because the same command would execute multiple times, right? Maybe that's just a 1 selection kind of thing. Maybe I'm actually overthinking that. Because again, the idea is I should be able to do this and have the whole content of the file shuffled out to something external and then do it. As a matter of fact, what happens if we have this text selected and we send cat to, let's see, 2 greater than ampersand 1. Is that a good way to test that? I don't think that it is. I don't think that it is a way to test that. Yeah, we'll worry about that in a second. Trying to work through what exactly is we want to do here. We want to be able to say this or any command, but cat's a good one because it would actually capture all the output, send it out, and then still do an insert instead of a replace, which right now doesn't work. So we need to be, the way that we send this code through into the thread is it just has a list of the regions that it's going to work with, which is either the whole buffer or the selections. And this is where this is going wrong because it's ending up in this one where it's passing the selection, and the selection is nothing if there's nothing selected, but you still want it to do that part anyway. And the reason we're doing it that way is because otherwise doing this and saying something else other than cat, that's a bad example here, would capture all of the output and send it the way you want, but the implicit region constructed by 0 and self view size puts the cursor position at the last point in the cat file. So if this was a really large file, it'll ship it all out, do the command and insert it, but it'll be way down at the bottom of the file and not necessarily where your cursor happens to be. So if I wanted to actually inline the content to this file right here, that wouldn't work with the other code because it would grab all of this, and because it implicitly selected this, the whole content of the file would get injected there and not there. So at the very least, our thread needs to have a distinction between the regions it should capture text from and the place where they should be inserted, which can sometimes both be the same thing and could sometimes be use this whole region but still use the selections for insertion. And we could potentially run afoul of the disturbing idea that there's multiple non-empty selections. Should the same thing be inserted in 3 places in that case? Should this handling only trigger when there's 1 selection? Might be the way to go here, right? But if we modify this like so, so the thread that we're executing gets that, and we get, let's say, regions and selections like this, and we pass the same, same thing into both. And down here, we execute the command, and then we do pipe text action with this. Oops, pardon me. Our region is the place where it's going to be inserted, that particular text. So I think we here would use, selection is what we want for that. And because it's going to bother me if I don't answer Ashwin's question there, let's say we very quickly touch gen error and world's smallest thing. Two greater than ampersand 1. Thus. So if I said gen error, that should be generating it to standard out, right? Is that any different than what I did previously? I don't think that it is. I guess the easiest way to go would be this. I am not an error would be the one, and that would be the other. You execute it, you see the both, and if you pipe it to dev null, whoops, then yeah. Oh, maybe the redirection has to happen at the other part. Tells you how long it's been since I worked on anything bash related. Cat? No, you still want to echo that. Is there, whoops, whoa. Is there actually an argument to echo to get it to generate the standard out? Maybe I'm even overcomplicating that. That does not necessarily seem like something that should be an issue. I mean, I could write a C thing to do it. Man, I'm pretty sure that something like that should send standard out, but not standard error. Because I have a lot of cron tab entries that do something different. Let's do just a very quick. Oh, okay. I had the right idea. I knew that was the case. I was going to put it earlier, and then I thought that's not going to work, right? 2 greater than it needs to be there, not there. Theoretically. Oh. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, never mind. I'm being a double dingus. Don't redirect standard error to standard output. I do the same thing too often. All right, that's quadruple embarrassing. Pardon me. Redirect to standard error. Whoops. Most of the time when I do something like this, I'm specifically trying to redirect standard error into standard output so that I can actually capture all of the output. There we go. Christ on a cracker. Okay. We'll do that, and that's gen error, right? So if I did this, oh, I broke my code. How did I do that? Oh, I got it. Oh, all right. Okay, well, we'll fix that in just a second because this part's more important. Okay, try that again. Oh no. We'll make a new one, and then life will be good. I never thought you could enter Vim in Bash in Terminus. Does that mean I can edit session files in Vim through Terminus and the changes would carry over? I don't think so, because I think it only loads the session file at startup. I don't think it sees changes to the session file while it's running, because it assumes that, it already has its own state. But that's why the session cleaner script on the Stealthy and Hasty repository recommends that you don't have Sublime running while you do it. But nevertheless, you could give it a try and see. It might do something. That project history thing, if it actually had the ability to, I think that's the thing that was mentioned in Discord, using project history as a package to manage your project history because it lets you rename projects and stuff. I think the way that works is it doesn't use the information from the session file. I think it remembers projects on its own, and that's probably one of the reasons why. And the answer to your question is no, standard out doesn't get injected into the buffer. Only the standard input part. So that might be something else to note. Maybe the errors need to go somewhere. But we need to know a little bit more about how this part works. So let's say, should we capture standard error and redirect it to a panel or an annotation of some sort? Because that seems like something that it would be interesting to know if nothing gets inserted in there. One of the questions that Keith and I were also kicking around that we didn't come up with a particularly good answer to is what happens if the command fails in general? Or if you had three different selections and you were executing the command over three of them, and one of them failed, what should happen to that one? And should that affect the other two or not? That's a bummer. Yeah, it is at some level. That's why these launchers up here for starting merge and starting Sublime Text actually run a shell script I created, which runs the session cleaner, but only if the thing isn't already running. So that as long as I remember occasionally to start the tools up there, my list of projects is automatically pruned. But that's probably a little trickier to pull off on Windows without creating your own custom shortcut or Mac OS at all. Um, and there's got to be a way to run an application with arguments, but I'm not sure what it would be. Or I guess you could just create a dock icon for a shell script. Seems like that's probably doable. Um, Making sure everything's cool. Cool. So that's one thing we're going to note there. And so let's see. Pipe text action is going to get a region begin and end. Oh yeah, it has to remove that region from the list. So there might be a little bit more action going on here. You either do a replace or do an insert depending on what was actually provided. So what we were doing is kicking off this thread, getting a list of regions that represent the source of the text to grab, which is that one. And then another one, which would be the place to actually insert it, which it would be that one. And that requires remembering how to iterate over a list of things and get the index of the thing as well, which is one of those things I do so infrequently I can never remember. We'll just go ahead and with index. I can't remember where I've done that before. I guess you'd probably have to maybe just use a reverse range. Another doubt is when a shell command is already running, does the command again allow to run some other shell command at that time? Yeah, that would probably be cool too. Not have that happen as well. I'll add that to the top of the file, but I think that one would be easy to solve if the command disabled itself while it knew it was running or while that thread was running, for example, which sort of goes to another item. I'll add that up here. Should we block execution of the command if it's already running? That's just a general one. We don't want to just have that separated out too much. Actually, maybe the better place for that is down here. One of the things that is pending implementation after we decide how to best pull it off is the idea that when you do that execution and you get the annotations on the right hand side, there could be a little button in there you can click on to cancel. And in that case, does it just cancel that one or does it cancel all of them? But the idea that you want to cancel commands at all means that, this where we create the thread should be a member that's inside a member of this and not just a variable. That's why we created it this way last time. And then the command could disable itself if self.thread is not none. And self.execute, the last thing it does is could be to set that to be none, so that the command could implicitly disable itself while it's already running. Or alternatively, when the file is read-only, which was the first thing I thought of, but the file very briefly swaps from being read-only to read-write and back to read-only if there's multiple selections and it's inserting this one. It has to make the buffer temporarily not read-only to insert it, and then it puts it back, and it would be possible for you to hit the key or otherwise execute the command in that split second. And those are the sorts of threading race conditions that work 99% of the time or 99.99% of the time, and then that 0.001% is the part where you want to stab yourself in the eye with a hot poker because something has gone wrong and you can't figure out why. Just looking to see if there's a fancy way to iterate and get an index without just saying range. It seems like something I've done before, but I can't remember whereabouts I would have done it, you know? Enumerate. Right. Enumerate, reverse enumerate. I guess that would probably work out, wouldn't it? Let's just go ahead and say boop, boop, boo. Is that the sort of thing that you can do? Seems like that's probably something cool. Let's go up closer to the top of the file so it's easier to tell what it's doing. 0 is 15, 15, and 1 is 0, 0. Well, that certainly looks like it did the right thing. Let's add one more. 0, 37, 115, 2 there. I guess the issue is that it's coming up the wrong thing. It suddenly is raining heavily here, so it's becoming way more chillier. Oh, I envy you, sir. I sort of fell asleep on the couch the other night while I was waiting for the latest video to upload, and I got woken at midnight with the loudest thunder I have heard in 15 years. Mostly because I live in the Pacific Northwest of Canada, so for most of, in other parts of the world, moisture will gather in the atmosphere and then hang out for a while before it falls out of the sky as rain. In the Pacific Northwest, any moisture that gets into the air immediately just starts falling as rain. So it never really gets to thunderstorm type status most of the time. But when it does, it's pretty fantastic. And I got woken up by a thunder peal that made me wonder if someone's house exploded, followed by rain that was so loud it sounded like it was hailing against the barbecue outside, but it only lasted for about 15 minutes and then it was super hot the next day, so no luck there. The index that we're getting here is not one that we necessarily want, because it's the index of the reversed list. But we actually want the other that to go the other way, because if we're going to get the same list twice, we need to be able to index the second one using the same index. So we need those numbers to be 210 and not 012. Based on how convoluted, crap. Forgot that part. Based on how convoluted that last thing was, let's see. If index starts off at 0, then we want the length of the region minus index minus 1. Oh, sorry, length regions. Don't go crazy. So with 3 regions, length of regions is 3 minus the index is 0, which is still 3 minus 1 is 2. And for the last one, when the index is 2, that's 3 minus 2 is 2 minus 1 is 0. So that seems like it would probably do what we want. And just to verify, 2, 1, 0. We're getting the correct stuff, and then I will have to quit or close and reopen that. But that'll give us what we like here. We'll say IDX and region in enumerate. Sometimes I think I should have a little post-it note stuck on the bottom of my monitor with all of the questions about Python that I have on a routine basis and forget. Then we can say selection equals selections at the index of the length of, well, I'll say length of selections minus index minus 1. Take that part out, and now we have a selection that we can use here. So it uses the region that it gets to pluck the substring, and it uses the associated selection as the place where the insertion or the replacement happens. And swap that over. That should mean that this all, technically works out, right? I saved that and it seemed to work. So that should leave things working exactly the same as they did before. We'll just add a cat in here. And, oh, shoot. I guess I shouldn't have copied and pasted that code so much, huh? It's one of those days. Close that and reopen it. Thank you. Should have a good way to reorganize tabs without doing that. All right. Again, we'll close that, create a new one, select everything, pipe it through that, and it gets inserted at the end. So it is doing what it did before, which is good. And we can also do that and that, do the same thing, and we should get the cool duplication of items. And with that out of the way, quote unquote, we could move on to the idea that pipe text command can gather the regions distinctly from the selections. So let's see. If not all of the selections are non-empty, are there any selections that are empty? That's probably a better way of saying if not all selections are non-empty, which I think is an official comment that Keith added in there. I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, let's do this. We'll go up here and then we'll stop doing that. Compare as we dare. So if not all self.view.cell, like so, else. So it would look like this, right? So this part's the same. I think use the user's selections is that. So here, whoops, do that. All selections are non-empty if you get into this part. right? And if all selections are non-empty, then regions is equal to self.view.cell. Oh, I wonder. I think we need to do that. Otherwise, we end up with two references to the same list, probably. That would not be good for us. It's the same every time because it's the selection for this view. So yeah, I think we want that and selections is the same. So that we end up with two, and basically that's because we want these two things to always be distinct. And if you pass the same thing for twice, then just because you have it in a different variable doesn't mean that it's a distinct object, and they'll still end up being the same. And that code we just added makes no effect whatsoever. So we comment out. No, we got to do something there too. Are there any selections that are non-empty? Then we would say selections is still that. As a matter of fact, let's all selections are non-empty. So replace every selection region with itself, like so. At least one selection is not empty, so use the whole buffer, but put it into every selection. Okay, so no matter what, the selections are always the same, right? So we can optimize that away once we know that this is actually working. And then regions would be a list that is self.view. Sublime.region 0 len self.view, which is different than I did it down below. I can't remember if that was official code, so we'll keep it that way just for simplicity's sake, and we multiply that by the length of selections so that there's one copy of the region for everything, because the code is going to expect that. This is the version that it used to use, so we take that part out, and this one becomes selections like so. That still loads, so that's nice. If I did this, I end up with a double lorem. If that's selected and, okay, that's selected and that's there, we pipe it through and, oh, it blew up. List remove X not in list. Oh, crap on a cracker. Yeah, I forgot about how that command actually works. This is probably still read-only, right? Oh, no, it's actually not, but we don't want it anyway. I'll close that. So let's consider what we did here, because we're invoking that command, giving it the region that it should replace things in, and the actual stuff to replace. This is probably where p.standardError would go, and is probably the easiest way I could have answered your question, Ashwin, about what happens if there's an error. The other part of that, if that was actually what you were asking, is it doesn't do this part at all, and it just logs a failure and then tells you about it later in the status bar. Or in a error message, I should say, if the command literally returns a failure, which maybe is different than what you would use the standard error for. It seems like that might be better served in a panel so you could see things in line. But the reason that this is here is because we add those annotation regions to the buffer, and as we replace one of the regions, we need to remove it. So the fact that we decoupled this here is breaking this because it still needs to know the source region anyway. So I think we might do this. And this would be region. Let's go ahead and wonder where my mouse went. There we go. Okay. We want both of those. And we find the actual command. Yeah, thanks. Source region and replace region. So we're going to need to do a couple of these things, aren't we? Okay, so let's go ahead and paste a duplicate of that. And do one of those and one of those. Don't actually need the source region here, do I? Yeah, I did. I did that in the wrong order. Pardon me. We need to remove the source region from the list of regions. And then we do this in the replace region. That was the ultimate intent. So we have the place where the actual source of text came from so that we can remove the annotation for it, which we do, and we have the actual place that should either be replaced or inserted at, depending on how we specified it. So now we did this. It's pulling the whole buffer and only inserting it in one place. Oh, because that's still failing. How is that not in the list? Should not the source region be the same because I did that magic business there? Let's go here. Let's capture the regions as we see them there. Maybe we'll actually add a comma there, though, not that thing that breaks it. And we execute that down here. And then we say region is that and selection is that, and then region selection. The source region is the region, the replace region is the selection. That seems like it's probably correct. So if this file looked like this, and there was a selection there and a selection there, and we did this, then setting no annotations at all. Oh, it's right there. 448 and 448. That's 448 and 448. Oh, I see. Fail silently in that situation. Where's that actually failing? It's failing in here, right? Now, what's the actual exception there? Value error. Except. If we're running that's probably more along the lines of what we're actually expecting to have happen here. Sorta. I mean, it definitely worked. What do we actually expect to have happen here? Not all of the selections are full, so it's going to grab the whole buffer, and then it should do an insert at 2 locations. So the whole buffer is the lorem ipsum with 2 blank lines. So we would expect to see one at the bottom and one after the word lorem there, which is what happens. We're running into some sequence issue here. I think. Oh, sorry, that's the line. So there to there is the one that was just inserted. The cursor was there. This is the remainder of the first one, and there's the second one. So that actually works. So if I was just down here and I did that, I would still get the whole file, which is what I wasn't getting previously. So that actually seems to do what one would like. Maybe we'll move this comment up here. We'll wrap that a little bit nicer. And let us, don't want that. It's the only one of those, right? Yeah. Whoops. Don't want that one either. Yeah, that's right. Should not have been quite as complicated as that. Now, can this actually be cleaner? Yes. Selections is the list of selections no matter what. So that only needs to happen once. It doesn't need to be in both places. At least one selection is not empty, so use the whole buffer, but put it into every selection. The other way to do that would be to make sure that it's only the first selection that something happens in, but perhaps you get more functionality this way. So that's that. I think that's probably pretty good. Something funky is happening because that command palette being teeny tiny at the top of the window only seems to happen when I'm working on this package, though I haven't really done a heck of a lot lately of plugin related nature in the last week. So there's that, I suppose. Oh, let's stage that hunk and that hunk, and we'll just say actually, maybe that's not actually what I want to do here. As a matter of fact, let's unstage that. Because I think let's throw them in here instead of having them in the code. And up here. Doop, and bang. Oops. Oh, and if the what should happen if the command fails for one of multiple selections, which is also something that Keith and I were pondering, but did not actually do anything about or come up with any item, shall we say. We can leave that until later. We verify here what changes we made. This command now, instead of taking a list of regions, takes regions and selections, and that takes regions and selections, and it iterates reversed over regions, but also gets a selection at the same index. In a way that seems mildly crunky, but still, I mean, the other way to do that, actually, now that I think about it, maybe if we did it reversed, we'd end up with 0, 1, 2. We could just index with a minus version of the index, but minus 0 probably wouldn't do what we want, so we need more stuff, right? Yeah. The source region and is the place where the data is getting pulled from, and the replace region is the selection, and our pipe text action command gets 2 regions now instead of 1, so that it can try to remove the source region and then do the replace in the replace region to make sure that that'll all work out. So I think that's probably cool, but as far as things go, but say with yeah, that's probably a good way to say that. If there are any selections that are empty, then the regions to replace in is the whole buffer, but one of them for every selection. Otherwise, it's replacing over the same place that it's sourced data from. So that seems cool. Those arguments are being passed. To do also report the selection index. Yeah, I don't know what the good way to do that is. Do you actually want to see 0, 1, 2? Do you want to see the location in the file? Maybe we leave well enough alone on that one. But if I did cat, that does not seem quite right. If I did this and nothing is selected, it grabs the whole thing and puts it in there. But, oh, actually, I guess that works the same both ways, doesn't it? Or is it supposed to? Oh, do replaces doesn't figure in here like it's supposed to. Ah, right. I totally broke that. Crap. Well, I'm glad I thought of that. Let's find that code that I just finished dumping. You only want to, if not all selections are non-empty, use the entire buffer, but only when if you're doing a replace, right? If we're doing a replacement, then crap, I've already lost track. If you're using the exclamation point, you're asking it to do an insert, right? Sometimes it helps to keep track of your own stuff. The intention was, if this is the case, the command operates as above, but the result of the command is inserted into the buffer instead of replacing. So, do replace literally means, are we replacing? Then use the, yeah. Huh. What's the best way to handle this, I wonder? Let's see what we got here. All selections are non-empty and we should insert. We should insert is 1, 2 is all selections are non-empty and we should replace. And then the third case is at least one selection is empty and we should insert, and at least one selection is empty and we should replace. So these are all of the cases that we technically need to handle here. I'm willing to bet that no matter what, the list of selections is the list of selections, but maybe not. If all selections are non-empty and we should be inserting, then this list of source regions and the list of selections can be the same because the command knows to insert at the end. Let's push these two up to each other like this. I'm not sure what the best logic for this actually is, though. So this is an interesting conundrum to have at this particular point. One way to handle this is to try all of the iterations of it and then see what feels best. So if all the selections are non-empty, we have two selections. Let's go ahead and do this way. I'll pull this over here. Case 1 is this. And we want to insert. So we want to execute cat for each of those two things and insert at that position. So both of these should be duplicated in one place. So the source region and the selections in this case should be identical. So, and then the command would know that it should insert at the end. If instead I said cat, then we're replacing this. We're executing the command twice, sending this out, and replacing the whole thing with itself, which ends us up the same. And in that case, again, the place to pull the data from and the place that it should be inserting it are both the same. If one selection is non-empty, and we should replace. That's the bit where we start to get a little funky. If it looks like this, and we execute cat, the fact that one of these is non-empty means that it's going to grab the whole buffer, but the selections need to be different, right? Whole buffer diff selection. Because we want to take the whole buffer and replace this with the whole buffer and replace that with the whole buffer. Is there actually a use case for that? I'm not sure. And if we should, if at least one selection is not empty. Sorry, I was talking about the replace one. I did that in the wrong order. Or did I? Also, all selections are non-empty. Well, pardon me. So let's just double check this. All selections are non-empty, like this. And we should insert, they should both be the same. Pull that, insert there, pull that, insert there. And this one, at least one selection is empty and we should insert. In that case, that looks like this. It's going to pull the whole buffer. That would be one where it's the whole buffer in a different selection because the whole buffer is the one place to go and then it's going to insert it in two places. So this one should actually look like this. So maybe I actually have this correct right now. And then we say all selections are non-empty and we should replace. Then they can both be the same because it's going to pull this, it's going to replace back into its own spot. So that would be a both the same, like so. And at least one selection is empty and we should replace. So if we did that and this, it's going to pull the whole thing. This one I think is the one that's causing me some mental static because if at least one selection is empty and you should replace, the result of that would be this entire buffer gets inserted here. It replaces that, and then it replaces this empty selection, so a new one gets inlined in. So is that what we want? Is this the case where if at least one selection isn't empty, then grab the whole buffer and only insert and only replace? If at least one selection is empty, it's going to grab the whole buffer. And if that's the case, no matter how many selections there are, it should just replace the whole buffer, right? I think that might make the most logical sense. When you're doing an insert, it makes sense to grab the whole buffer, shuffle it through the command. When I say makes sense, I mean there's an idea that a person might want to do that. Shuffle the entire contents of this buffer out to an external command and then insert the results in two places, regardless of what the selection is. But if you were going to replace and you were going to grab the whole of the buffer and replace the selection with the whole of the buffer, and there's at least one selection that's empty, do we still want to do that? Or do we want to say, in that case, grab the whole thing and just replace the whole buffer as if it was selected? Because otherwise you're coming into a situation where we have an external program where we want to pass this whole content of this file and we want to replace a small part of this file with it, and then we just want to insert the result of the command in one spot. I can see why that might be a thing. So, yeah, maybe that's what we want. So when all the selections are non-empty, they should both be the same, which is what they are right now, and otherwise they should be different. It's the whole buffer selection times. I think logically, until we can come up with a reason why not to do that, that's actually what we want. So yeah. I'll say this. Gather the list of selections and replace insert regions. If any selections any of the selections is empty, the whole buffer is used, but it will apply to every selection for the purposes of inserting or replacing. So then we can just say, at least one selection is not empty, use the whole buffer, but operate over every selection. And all the selections are non-empty, replace every selection region with the results in the command over itself. I think that is what we want to do for that. Man, that's some rough action right there. Yeah, and then we'll go ahead and stage that hunk. We have selections and selections. Passing that in, and here it's using the source selections and the region selections in both places. So send the whole file content if there are some empty selections, like so. And we'll commit that, and we'll worry about doing something with that later. And we'll say I'll come back and fix some stuff about that later and swap those around. So we'll commit that one. Now, one other thing that we need to do here is capture the history and save it, because right now, if I did this and reload that plugin, the history of this is now lost. So we want to save that history. And what's the best way to pull that off, do we think? My theory is we edit the pipe text wrapper plugin to have a plugin loaded and a plugin unloaded. When plugin unloaded is called, we use the history object to write a text file one line per history item to a text file in the cache folder, and use plugin loaded to load that into the history. I think that's probably kosher. Yeah, we need to do that in that order, don't we? Get returns self-storage. Self-storage is the list. So our first in order of business is Maybe we make this, no, this is creating an instance of the thing, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. So we don't we don't need a plugin loaded for this. We only need a plugin unloaded because we're not doing anything in here that's API related. So I think that means we might want to say something like, and we'll even add a separate pipe text history.text, let's say, and we say that stores our history, which technically doesn't even need to be a variable, could just be inlined in here for all anybody cares. But we would say history file like so. And we need to import, whoops, OS. And then in init, this would also have a file name. And then with open something t as file, something like yaw, open that particular file, which would be this. At importing time, plugins may not call any API functions with the exception of version, Sublime Platform, Arch, Sublime Channel. I think that has been changed because they say we might need plugin loaded, but API, executable path, packages path, installed path, and cache path may now be called at import time, which is in the change log, but it's not in the official documentation, which is why it's not in Snappy yet. So we can, in fact, call Sublime cache path here and not worry about it. So we actually want to have, I'll put an R in there too. OS.path join cache path and history file. That's rough. Oops. No, I guess we probably want something like that. Oh, actually, yeah, I guess we did want that. Pardon me. We can do that for that particular case, but we can just say self.storage equals file.readlines. I think. I've written this completely off the top of my head, having a little conception of Python read lines, whether or not this is actually how you do this, because as I pointed out in many a stream, I don't do API or file IO in Python at this level often enough to know for sure. But we're going to go ahead and click that. Read lines reads until end of file using read line and returns a list containing the lines. If the optional size hint argument is present, instead of returning up to, it'll return that many. So I think that'll do what one thought that it would do. And here we need to say try accept pass and the same thing. And this is where this cries out for a method that returns the file name for the thing. Python write lines. Is there a way to do that? Yes. Cool. I think that's the deal. That returns the storage. Oh yeah, that's the old one. It's okay now. So we'll say trying to load history. History load failed, and let's try. I did that wrong. Those are saves. And history load failed. Let's double check in the console, shall we? Does this come up with what we've... how about if we use the correct thing? So we come over here and say ls and cat, and also ls. I think that might not be working the way Keith wanted it to. Cat. Yeah, I think we want to swap that back. That's the thing that I noticed before. So we'll subvert history there. But in any case, if I save that, it's trying to save history. It's trying to load history now. Dang it. The save of history. Needs to do that, I think. We may need to delete that particular file. That probably just put it back, right? Package cd cd cache, and yeah, so let's just do this. Cat ls cat ls. It's the actual content of this thing. Oh yeah, we're totally gonna get screwed again. Okay, we'll just do that in an outside terminal then, shall we? That's the easiest way to fix that, I guess. Package cache. That is the history as it exists there, so that's good. Fire this up. And it should have said something, I would imagine. Doesn't look like it. But the new lines can't be in this part. Ugh. This is rough. Can you make read lines strip new lines off? That's an intriguing question. Just looking to see. That does not seem to be magic. Yeah, we'll worry about that later because this is pretty crude. But most importantly, that is not doing what we want. So let's jump back to the other one for a minute. This is pretty much, I mean, oh yeah, it happens out of line there, if you will. Okay, we'll blank that, and the other way to do that, incidentally, would be with the settings thing. And up here too, we don't need that. As a matter of fact, it probably makes more sense to have this all inside of the class, doesn't it? So we'll worry about that in just a moment. At least one selection is not empty, so use the whole buffer, but operate over every selection. At least one selection isn't empty. So the list of selections, these actually do have to change in this one particular case. Everything else is still okay. We'll again, worry about this in just a moment. So at least one selection isn't empty, so use the at least one selection is not empty. If we're replacing, so use the whole buffer as the source region. So we can say, I think we want this. Yeah, actually, let's do it this way. Do that. If we're replacing and not inserting, then use only a single selection that also... Oh, yeah, I guess we have to do that in a different order, don't we? Yeah. Okay. This is how we're going to do this. Are we replacing? If do replace, then regions is equal to, we'll just copy this. It's equal to that, but only one of them, because we want to use the whole thing. And selections is equal to that as well. And again, we want to make sure this. So source the whole buffer and replace it into the whole buffer. I'm not entirely sure now that I've started typing it whether that's actually correct. Otherwise, we're inserting. That's when you use the actual thing for it. And we're inserting, so send out the whole buffer, but insert into the selections, which is that. and then this part goes away. That I think is actually what we want here. So if we do cat, we end up with the exact same text, which is what you might expect. If we wanted to run a command and replace the whole buffer, that's when we don't include that bang on the front of the command. So this should replace the whole buffer with the list. But if we said cat, it should put the whole buffer into that position. And if we did ls, it should do the same. And if we had just some selected text like that, and we did cat, my history went away. The history might still be broken thanks to that change I just made. It should capture the whole line, send it out, and insert it in both places. So the first line will double, and then it'll also appear on line 8. Oh, no, sorry, it's using the whole buffer because there's one non-empty selection. So it inserts the whole thing, and then there's another one starting on line 8. So that is what one might expect if you wanted to do it that way. I think what you really might want to do is something along those lines if you were going to do that. If you wanted to actually insert them in addition to text, more often than not, for something like that, you would just cat. Oh, sorry, let's take that back one more. The most useless thing we can type here is just cat, and then both of those actually do that. And we could ls to replace both of those selections. That, I think, is more like what we actually intended that to do. So let us stage that hunk and amend. Was it the previous commit now? No. Crap. Do that. And then we can stash and dunk. There. That'll be a little bit better. And we're back to our history type action, which may or may not currently be broken. And we're almost out of time here. So let's sort of tweak this up a little bit. Let's say def load history self and file name. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. If we're going to do it, let's go to town. Pipe text history.text, like so. And then we can, I think, for a class and return os.path.join sublime.cache path and class.history file. And here we can just say print thus cancel that out. And here we don't need a file name anymore. We'll just say self.load history, comment that bit of nonsense out and replace that with that, comment that, save, quit, restart to have us in an entirely clean state. And now when I save this, you kind of miss seeing the old Monakai. Yeah, I kind of do as well, but I need to be able to work in this color scheme because it's the one that I'm going to be using in my videos once Sublime 4 becomes active. So it's actually growing on me a little bit now that I drop the darkness of the background a little bit. Some of the colors are still a little weird, but the thing that kind of surprised me about that swap is that Mariana is a more mature color scheme, such as it is, because with the advancements that have been happening in the packages that ship with Sublime and scopes have been changing, Mariana is the one that's been being updated because it's also used in Merge, I think is the reason why that's the case. Uh, but I did a little diff with a plugin of what scopes appear in Mariana that don't appear in rules in Monakai, and there's very few of them. So I'm not sure why it wasn't possible to add extra rules for the things that aren't there to bring it up to spec. The argument that Will gave was people expect Monakai to look the same everywhere. So I guess they thought that if there were some things that are syntax highlighted differently here than elsewhere, then someone would complain about it. I'm not sure I necessarily follow the logic of that operation. Why am I doing that? I don't need that. So it's definitely gathering the correct thing, so that's nice. Is that still possible? Let's check that. We're going to see it way up here. That still works. Looks nice. Good, good. So we have one thing, getting the history file, and then if we were going to load it, that would be this, right? So this is the bit where we would say if self.history file, whoops, is a file, then try this, right? That seems like the way to go. Comment that out. Seeing this function be called twice in quick succession like this makes me really want to memorize the history file class method so that it only has to call path join once instead of the eventual 3 times that it's inevitably going to do something in. It's probably also worth noting that I don't think we want this to necessarily happen in plugin unloaded. So we probably want that to go away too, because the only time the history would actually get saved is if this plugin file was actually saved. Otherwise, it wouldn't do anything at all, which is probably not what we want. So read lines brings in the new lines. We need to add, so we need to strip them off here. Let's just double check here. Something seems like maybe instead of doing read lines, if you want to read all the lines of a file in a list, you can use lift F or read lines. Yeah, I know. That's what the thing I'm looking for, bro. I'm looking for read lines in this, but it's not showing up. Often the documentation for Python irritates the hell out of me. When I know how to search a thing and I want to find it somewhere else. but that's not how that works. You see mentions to things that aren't links to other things. File input module, is that the thing? Doesn't look like it. I think this is the thing that I was just looking at. I should probably be doing that on this monitor over here, but you know how I like to keep things all secret like, so we'll leave that for the time being. Storage and load history. So we copied that. We don't need it here anymore. We'll just say try to open it and strip all the new lines off, store it in. Otherwise, pass. Nah, which isn't what you want to do. But what's the good way to handle such a thing? Error reading pipe text, pipe command history, pipe text history. Yeah. That'll do something, right? Right. This isn't how I wanted to implement this. Son of a. Okay. I meant to have, no, that's right. This is the actual history command. I was thinking that this was the wrapper. So when you create this class, it will load its history, if it can, into its own storage list, replacing the one that is there. Otherwise, it'll do nothing. And then we also need a def save history. This is the one where I wish I hadn't blooped that code out before we were all done. With open self.history file, write text as file, file.write lines L plus a new line for L in self dot storage. Thus, and exception as E. Let's say this. Save %d entries to the pipe text history file. We'll say we did a little thing and then say copy that file out. Over like so, error. Writing pipe text history. So did I just put something in the wrong place? Yeah, I want to do something like this here too. Loaded 0 entries from the pipe text history file. All right, let's quit that and do this. Cat ls cat ls, like so. Fire this up. Reloaded 4 entries from the pipe text history file. So what we really need is something that occasionally dumps the history out. Now, how occasionally is occasionally? Every time a command is executed from the wrapper, perhaps? Debounced after a delay? This is one of those things that's open to interpretation. Wouldn't want to have a log in there. But if we actually executed this and pushed it onto the history, then we should say pipe command history.save history like so. So we save that. It's loaded 4 items. Let's back this all up and say sleep 5 and ls inserted into that location. It's doing it over the whole buffer, but it's inserting it at the end. And it saved 5 entries to the pipe text history because it managed to pull that off. So we could do it here like we do here. Every time this command executes, the history has been modified, so write the history out. Or we could just have something that saves the history once a minute if it's changed. We could have a debounced set timeout operation here that once you run a command, the history will be saved after a minute. But if you enter another command within that minute, then the timeout is reset to be a minute after that. So we're not obsessively saving things to the history file every time. But at the same time, we still get a chance to save things because doing it in plugin unloaded is only going to work if someone ignores the package, right? Sublime doesn't call plugin unloaded before it shuts down. Although, now that we say that, one of the things that's new, of course, is called once after the API has shut down immediately before the plugin host process exits, which isn't something that used to exist. It only has, you need Sublime Text 4050 for this, but that's an awesome place to throw this in. It's not necessary that it actually log anything, mind you. We already have an event listener. So that's nice. So if we did that there, then we wouldn't do it in the place where we were doing it just a moment ago. So that part is gone now. The fact that it's printing something doesn't really matter because you're never going to see it. The API has shut down. Every time I save this, we see it saying how many things it loaded. So if I came to here and did this, this is a new command, and it'll, after a bit of time, blink onto the end. Now remember, there were 5 entries in the history. I quit. Still 5. That so that should have done something, but it doesn't look like it did. It's still 5 and not 6. Called once immediately before the plugin host process exits. Well, I mean, at some level, we have to assume that it hasn't, it might have, would it unload plugins? Could we maybe do that? Let's give that a try. I don't think plugin unloaded is called at shutdown that I'm aware of anyway. But I guess it's easy enough to find out. Copy that and throw one in here. That part doesn't have to be here. That part does. Save, quit, start. to make sure things are cleared out. And boy, one reason to do that in plugin loaded, I tell you what, make sure it ends up in the right part. So I might just end up doing that anyway, instead of, but it would have to be called created at, yeah, okay. So sleep 5 and echo hello. And there it goes. And let's say I quit. Whoops. Say I quit. It's still 5 items. So that also did nothing. Oh, that's not going to do what I wanted. I just noticed something that was happening there. Well, yeah, that one doesn't count, bro. Got to redact that one out and fire that one up. That was because I reloaded the plugin, which is probably a good place to have that anyway, just for reasons like this. Loaded 5 entries from the pipe history file, like so, right? Okay, so we undo that and then say 20 and cripes. Do that. Can hover the mouse over that. No. Or we can just sort of click on it to actually see what the whole command is that it's executing. That's why I wanted to do that. I don't think that was working in the last thing. If the command was extra long, it just seemed to be cut off. Now it has thrown that stuff out, so we're going to quit, and there's still only 5. So I'm not entirely sure why that's not working, because it really seems like if on exit is a thing, then that is the thing, right? So just very quickly, I guess, what we could do. Before we call it a night for the stream, local Sublime Text lib on exit is called once the API is shut down, which means a standard out for callback. Okay, so that's in Sublime plugin. So on exit, it's an event. Yeah, that's not surprising. View event listener excluded. Yeah, it's not a view event listener thing. On exit is called once the API is shut down, which means standard out will not be visible for debugging. Thus, we write to a log file. A log file, you say? Oh, I see. If anything writes to standard out, it writes it to a log file. Otherwise, no, huh? Okay, what's log path? That's the only other instance of that, right? Oh, I see. We're not going to get to see that. That's not invoked here. So what the actual log is its own thing. But on exit is definitely a thing. And our plugin is definitely a Python 3.8 plugin. Otherwise, it wouldn't work at all. So the fact that the on exit in this event listener doesn't seem to do anything is intriguing, to say the least. But nevertheless, um, maybe that's because the object went away beforehand. I'm not sure, but I guess we're going to have to hang on that one and leave that for the next stream because we have gone a little bit over. I am kind of stifling in here with only the one fan on. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and call it here and possibly pick this up in the next stream. I have some stuff in Override Audit that I need to be doing to push out or release, but I keep putting it off because there's some other stuff that I want to do in there that I don't necessarily want to do on a stream because it would be boring. Maybe I need to go ahead and get into that because otherwise that next release is never going to get out. And we do have a couple of nice partial features already in there. But in any case, if you have been, thank you for watching. Remember, you can always subscribe if you'd like to know more. If you hit the bell notification icon, YouTube will let you know when I'm going live. In advance, as far as I'm aware. You can follow me on Twitter at OdatNurd. I also tweet out there when I'm going live. And I have another channel where we do weekly videos linked down in the description below. And the next videos coming out, what could they be? We were recently working on plugin 101 and talking about event listeners. So one thing we could do if we get enough response is some samples of event listeners to hammer that home. Input handlers. Otherwise, we might talk about event listeners in the next plugin 101 video. And what will the next tutorial be? You have to subscribe and ring the bell notification icon to find out. Until the next live stream and the next video, this is OdatNurd asking you to please have a sublime day. And try to stay cool out there if your temperatures are super stifling the way they are here, because good gravy, it is warm.